physics itself is mandating there is a transition coming in the 2012 window. The physics, like Mother Nature, cannot be fooled, and they're trying to manipulate events so that they wind up on the winning side after we move through the transition. This is one hell of a time to be alive.
No doubt about it. Well, I have to say that I agree with you, Richard, in the sense that there is a transition, and I would say, just to add my 2 cents here, that 2012 is not a date, as we have always said on Project Camelot, but it is a time period, and that actually stretches all the way to, from what I understand, to 2017, as a matter of fact. And I'd like to say that I've also heard and I understand that there are stargates that are opening during this period of time, that this energy is coming in, that we are in a specific place, our planet positioned for this particular time period, and that on top of it, I'd like to remind Bill of Henry Deacon's testimony when we first met him, which was all about preparing for the time period around 2012 and beyond. That does include actually 2010, 2011, 2014, and beyond, in which he felt that there was definitely going to be things like a magnetic pulse. We've heard from a scientist from Deep Black who has been recruited by, I believe I could say this, Homeland Security, and that he basically was recruited because he has been told there was going to be a pole shift, a magnetic shift, as well as a solar CME. Now, whether or not that's the case, we know they're underground bases. We know they're there for a multitude of reasons, one of which has been preparing for something. So whether you call it 2012 or whether you call it a time period that we are in that includes a return of maybe a brown dwarf, the energy, again, that Paul LaViolette, who is talking about the superwave, and so on, we've got a lot going on. There's no doubt about it. It's highly unlikely that nothing will happen. And I wouldn't call it 2012. I wouldn't say we've got a 2000, what was that, 2001? I forget, 2000. 2000. I wouldn't say it's that much of a non-entity, 2012, because I do believe the powers that be, according to Leo Zagami, and I think he's quite right when he was interviewed by us and he talked about how they are planning, in essence, to have Armageddon happen whether or not we want it or not. So it's something that's orchestrated, and so again, you've got humans actually taking action that may promote a certain event happening, and what you think about all that, we'll see. But at any rate, we have a lot more questions. Sorry, I've got somebody here asking if Richard and David will talk about the event, so I'm going to turn this over to David, if everyone will bear with me here. So there's a slight delay, just so you know that I'm not completely idiotic over here, with the video and the audio in terms of switching. So that's one of the things we wait for, is for the audio to pick up the cue of the new stream. And now we've got David live over here, and I'm sorry, David, but I have to.
Okay, can you hear my audio? How do I sound audio-wise?
You're fine. You're fine.
Good.
Go right ahead.
All right, great. So, okay, the event, very interesting television program. We had an insider come to me and say that there are multiple television shows that are being financed by what he called Uncle Sam, which really is the Pentagon. Fulford came out at one point, for what it's worth, and said that 75% of these action shoot-'em-up movies that you see in Hollywood are being financed by the Pentagon on a military budget, specifically for the purpose of training people to want to be in the military, manicuring society in the ways that they want them to be manicured. I walked in on that movie Pearl Harbor and didn't plan on seeing it, but we were at the theater. I was going to see some other film. This was in, I guess, 2001 in the summertime, and it did not propose the new version of Pearl Harbor that everybody's heard from the spy book, A Man Called Intrepid, suggesting that the Japanese code had been broken and that the attack on Pearl Harbor was allowed to occur because the U.S. government needed the public imprimatur to join World War II against Hitler. The people did not want to fight Hitler. They didn't have the stomach for war, so they allowed Pearl Harbor to happen. Now, this Pearl Harbor movie comes out in midsummer 2001. It was the biggest budget Hollywood movie ever made for its time. And I believe this was financed by the Pentagon. Look what happens a few months later, 9/11. The movie telegraphed the blow. Okay, the movie telegraphed what they were going to do with 9/11. And in the first section of my China's October Surprise article series, I give you an incredible list of all the alien invasion movies that are being planned. That does seem to be a strong part of what's being put out there. However, what you're seeing with the television show The Event is decisively different than an alien invasion story, because it begins with a remarkable expose that appears to be exactly the same as what Kerry and Bill and I were saying last year, based on what Pete Peterson said to us on video, that there was going to be an announcement by Obama on November 27th where he would come clean and apparently have 5 different representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations. You wouldn't be able to see them with the naked eye, so we need certain types of lighting, quote-unquote, that would be able to make them visible because they're slightly out of phase with our reality. We've heard other insiders say recently that there's so many UFOs or extraterrestrial craft in our airspace right now that it's like the airspace is really crowded and they're actually having a hard time getting around each other. But this is all happening on a spectrum that's not quite visual, but it's a little bit off. I was also told by this insider that there are routinely UFOs landing on the White House lawn and people coming in for meetings, but because they're outside the visible spectrum by a little bit, we don't see them. So we don't really know whether what Peterson told us was true. He said it was offset by 5 groups, but we are on record saying this. There's footage of Bill in Zurich saying this. He leaked the date, which I hoped he hadn't. But, that's the past, and we get past it. So the point is, it was out there, we talked about it, and now an NBC show comes out, and either these guys are fans of Project Camelot and watched our videos and listened to our radio shows and read our articles, which frankly I highly doubt, or this was something that really was planned, and the television show is referring to that, because the television show is basically identical to what we were told by Peterson, that you have this African-American who looks like Obama, who sounds like Obama, the same haircut, everything. And he's about to make the big announcement, and then there's an attack on his conference while he's standing there with the extraterrestrial female, and the airplane is being hijacked like 9/11, and right before it hits him, it goes through a wormhole. Here's the interesting thing about this show. As Richard has said, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but the backwards E in the title for the event means, in mathematics, the operative term there exists, i.e. extraterrestrials exist. It also forms the word Eve. To spoil the show a bit, if you go all the way to the end, we now know in the 10th episode that the main female character who's on all the posters is the child of her father, who happens to be an extraterrestrial. The big reveal before the halfway break of the season is that her father, you see all these pictures of him going back to the 1950s, and he never ages. So that implies that she is a human ET hybrid. And I think what they're doing by doing this is setting up the idea that we are not simply indigenous to this planet, that there are other humans who look just like us, but their DNA is a little bit different in the show,